Hello and welcome to Tech Deals, part 2 of the $900 Ryzen 7 1700 System Build Guide, BIOS update, Windows installation, driver setup, and Windows benchmarks. It's all here. If you look at the length of this video and go, holy smokes, that looks long, this is detailed and meant to provide information on people who are not familiar with either updating your system BIOS, installing Windows, or installing drivers. Some of this may already be familiar to you. You can skip towards the end of the video if you just like to see the benchmarks. I've got several in there. And then of course I've got some more RGB shots of it because it's an absolutely gorgeous build. If you've not seen part 1 of this video, which includes a parts overview and a build guide for the computer itself, check the link in the description below to the playlist, which will take you to all the videos on this computer. The next video, part 3, is going to be game performance benchmarks. It'll be one video where I have multiple games tested at all 3 resolutions, 1080p, 1440p, and 4K, to show you just how much an 8-core, 16-thread Ryzen 7 1700 CPU at 3.7 GHz can do, along with a 6GB GTX 1060. This thing really is a beast. For under $1,000, it's a huge value for the money. Now, check the links in the video description below as well for my affiliate links to Amazon and Newegg. All of the parts here, along with several optional upgrades, will be included down below to both sites. Please check prices. Buy it where it makes the most sense to you, but if you shop there and you use those links, it does support the channel. Thank you. In addition to all that, later in this video, I'm also going to show the purchase and activation of a Windows 10 Pro license key for just $12.60. I actually did do that, recorded it, and showed it here for this machine because I was out of license keys. We've previously done a video on that deal in the past. That link, along with the Tech Deals exclusive discount code, is also down below, so lots of reasons to check that out. You can also follow me on Twitch, Twitter, and we have a Tech Deals Discord, which is linked down below. We have a great tech help section, a great general community, a tech help, as well as an off-topic section. So if you're interested in a great community and a place to chat, please consider joining our Discord. And with all of that being said, let's jump straight into the BIOS update, which is the first thing we're going to do on this system. The first thing we need to do is update the system BIOS. I've pressed delete to go into the BIOS. I've already created a USB thumb drive with the latest version of the BIOS from Gigabyte and Windows 10, so we can get that set up. My particular gaming K7 has the launch BIOS. Yes, I've had this board on the shelf for a while, way back February of 2017. It would work actually because we're using a first gen Ryzen chip. If we had a Ryzen 7 2700, it wouldn't without a BIOS update first. We're going to hit the Alt button to bring up the options and then hit Q Flash to actually update the system BIOS. From here, we're going to click the Update BIOS button. We're going to choose the BIOS that's on our USB thumb drive, and then we're going to click the Next button. Now, hit Start here. Do not interrupt this. It's going to update your system BIOS. I have this running at 10 times speed. This will take much longer than what you're watching right here because this is sped up 10 times. But I want you to see that it cycles through. Once it does this, it's then going to reset the system. You then want to press delete to go back into the BIOS, and it's going to say your BIOS options have been reset and they need to be set up again. Now, this shouldn't be an issue. This is a brand new system. There were no BIOS settings. We never set anything up in the first place, so it's simply setting everything back to the default. In the BIOS, there's only 2 settings that we're going to change, and they're both under advanced frequency settings. We go in here, and the first thing is I'm going to change the CPU clock ratio from auto to 37. This is how we overclock the CPU to 3.7 GHz fixed on all 8 cores. Then I'm going to turn on Extreme Memory Profile, which will automatically set the RAM to its speed, which in this case is DDR4 3200. My RGB kit is actually 3200, even though I priced the 3000 kit in the build. You can see here we have the updated BIOS, which is May 1st, 2018, F23F. That is much newer than the version that was on this board. Here you can see the actual SSDs installed. I've got the 850 EVO and then the Crucial MX500 as shown in the first video. And then finally, we're going to come over to save and exit, and let the system reboot to the USB thumb drive. Now that we're booting to the USB thumb drive, it's time to install Windows. That's it. Everything you just said in the saw in the BIOS is all that you have to do to have your RAM run at full speed at 3200 or 3000 or whatever it is, and then to have the CPU run at 3.7 gigahertz, which is just fine on the stock cooler. Once we get in, we hit Next and we hit Install for Windows 10, and now we're going to go through an abbreviated Windows 10 setup process. You can set up your Windows 10 product key here if you want to, or hit I don't have a product key and enter it later. For the version, well, that's going to depend upon which version you're installing. Now, if you put in a product key, it will do this for you. I'm doing Windows 10 Pro because Windows 10 Pro keys are $12.60 with the exclusive Tech Deals discount code linked down in the video description below. We are doing a custom install, not an upgrade. So we'll click on custom here. And your drives may look different. My drives already have partitions on them because I've already used these in test systems and for benchmarking. So I'm going to delete all of the partitions here. You can't install Windows on the small reserve partition. So make sure you don't have data on your drives. This will permanently delete it. I don't. These were blank drives just used for benchmarking. So I'm deleting all the partitions. Windows will automatically create the partitions necessary. I'm going to select drive 0, which is technically drive 1. It's just how it numbers it. And then we're going to simply hit next and let Windows set up all the partitions and install. Once we get into Windows itself, then we'll go into Disk Manager to create a partition, a D drive, so to speak, on the second SSD. You could technically do it here. I prefer to do it in Windows. Then you just have to wait for the files to get ready for installation. I am speeding this up slightly to make the video shorter, but it is still very, very quick. Now, once this happens, it will then reboot the system. Take the USB thumb drive out when it reboots. You no longer need it. Windows is installed. It then goes through its normal setup process. With the updates installed, it finishes up, reboots the system, and we'll be back into Windows in just a minute. Don't be surprised when you see screens like this when you first install Windows, setting up devices, getting devices ready. This is just stuff that Windows is doing to recognize your computer because it has to find and detect your hardware, your audio, your LAN, and all the various components on your motherboard, drives, etc. So that's what it's doing at this point. We're going to skip ahead to the next prompt. Now Windows wants to know, what region are you in? Well, I'm in the United States, so I'll pick that, but select whatever works for you. Is this the right keyboard layout? I use a US keyboard. No, I don't want to add a second keyboard layout, so skip that one. This choice right here is very personal. 99% of you will choose setup for personal use. You're not part of an organization, you don't have a domain, that sort of thing. So setup for personal use, hit next. Now we come to a part that needs a little bit of discussion, Microsoft accounts. Now you can create an offline account, the old school kind of account you would have had in Windows XP days. Offline account is in the bottom left-hand corner. I use a Microsoft account. You need it for OneDrive, you need it for Skype, you need it for a variety of things. It links your Windows 10 product key to your account so you can move it around a bit easier between computers. I've done that more than once or twice on test benches. So I personally use a Microsoft account. You do not need a Outlook or Hotmail email address. You don't even need an email. You can use a phone or Skype ID. I personally use a Google account, for example, a Google email address for my Microsoft account, so you can use anything that you want. Set that up here, hit next, you'll have to put in a password, and then you'll see this screen. Create a PIN. I highly recommend you create a PIN, type in a 4-digit number, and that lets you log into Windows safely and securely. I don't do this here, link your phone and PC. Personally, I click do it later and then tell Windows never to bother me again. OneDrive, save your files only to this PC or save them to OneDrive. If you have a Microsoft account, then saving them to OneDrive is nice and convenient. I say no to Cortana. There's a bunch of privacy settings here, which I'm not going to go over right now. Read them, turn them on and off as you prefer. I just personally hit accept because I fully recognize that Windows 10 spies on me and there's not much I can do about it. With those settings out of the way, it's now going to go through its basic setup routine. Now we'll jump ahead to the next section. At this point, Windows 10 is basically installed. It really is this simple. It's a few prompts, it's a sign in, and then you're done. Except you're not, because we do have some drivers that we need to install. Now that brief message that popped up was searching for a display driver. It will install a basic driver for our Nvidia GeForce GTX 1060, but we really need to download the Nvidia drivers and a few other things, which I'm going to show you here in just a minute. Before you do anything else on your computer, the very first thing to be done is to run Windows Update. Start, Settings, come in here and run Windows Update. Now I turn on advanced options and choose give me updates for other Microsoft products. You can or can't at your personal preference. I also check that as well. Then hit the back button and then click check for updates. This will take some time. Even with a freshly created USB thumb drive, there's still going to be cumulative updates, security updates, malicious software removal tools, and so on. Let this run. It is going to want a reboot. Let it reboot and then we'll continue. Once the system has fully rebooted, you finally come into your login screen, you can type in your 4-digit PIN, and you're back to the Windows desktop with a fully updated copy of Windows. But Well, we're not quite done yet because we need to install some drivers. The Nvidia drivers are the first thing we need to install. Come here to the Nvidia driver download page. We'll take GeForce, we'll take the 10 series, and we'll hit search. We'll hit download, we'll agree to the terms and conditions, we'll hit download, we'll click save, because I personally prefer to save a copy and then run it, but that's personal preference. Let this download. I'm actually not speeding that up, by the way. I do have a fairly decent download connection. Let this download and then hit the run button. Now, in general, unless you really know what you're doing, I recommend you only install one driver, one program, one something at a time. In this case, I'm going to download and install Chrome while it's getting the Nvidia display drivers set up, because it's actually just extracting the files at the moment. It's not actually running the setup. Smart Screen doesn't detect, probably because I'm going too quickly. In any case, we'll go ahead and close Microsoft Edge, because I don't want to use Edge. I want to use Chrome. So this is going to get installed before the Nvidia display driver is even finished extracting. That is how quick this Ryzen 7 1700 really is. Now I'm going to go start downloading some other stuff, but I am not actually going to install them. I'm actually going to just click and download them, but I'll show you those here in a minute. Now in the cut there, I downloaded stuff but did not install anything else. So Chrome's installed, and now this is the very first driver that we're installing. Simply take the default options and let this run. This will take a couple of minutes. It's Nvidia, and GeForce experience isn't the fastest, so we'll skip ahead. Now this part here, I'm actually going to show you the background of extracting the files. I think this sort of thing gets overlooked a lot. This here is the Crucial Storage Executive. You could run the file out of the archive, but instead I'm going to drag, right-click, choose Extract, and actually extract it into its own folder rather than run it in the archive. Then I'm going to close those windows and let it actually run. It does require admin privileges, so we'll hit yes. This is the actual toolbox for updating the firmware of the SSD of the Crucial MX500, of checking its health, checking its life, and so on. We will also do one of these, Samsung Magician, for the Samsung 850 EVO SSD. We accept the agreement, get this installed, and then we'll hit finish, run it, and then this is what you'll see on the screen. Now this lets you monitor the drives in good health. That's excellent, but there's a new firmware update available. Solid state drives have processors, memory, and their own programs on board, and this is how you update them. They're actually intelligent drives. Now we do have the option of performing a live firmware update without requiring a reboot. I've done this multiple times without problems, but make sure you're not running anything else while you do it. We'll click Update Firmware Now. This will take a couple of minutes. Just leave the computer be and don't do anything. It'll finish in just a second. Rather than trim this, I looked at the time it took. This is real time. There is no speed up here whatsoever. It's going to be done in just a second. It really is very, very quick. But it will, there we are. We're complete. The firmware is updated and we're good to go. I recommend a reboot at this point, but it's technically not required. Your firmware is finished. There's another option I want to mention, Momentum Cache. There's a rapid mode on the Samsung drive. Momentum Cache, which is what Crucial calls it, basically uses some system RAM in order to improve the performance of your SSD even further and potentially improve its life by reordering reads and writes and caching reads and writes to make the SSD seem and feel snappier by using some of your main system RAM. It doesn't use tons, maybe half a gig, maybe a gig at most. And if you only had 8 gigs of RAM, I probably wouldn't enable this, but we have 16, so we're just fine. Now we're rebooted back into Windows. I do enable that on my SSDs, on my Crucials, and my Samsungs. It does make them snappier, it does make the system more responsive, and potentially maybe makes them last longer, although frankly drive life is not a big concern to me these days. Now it's time to set up Samsung Magician. We will extract this into its own folder, and then we will run the Magician installer. I'm showing you that so that you see sort of how I do it. It's as simple as extracting it by right-clicking, dragging, and choosing Extract. Now we'll just get everything set up here. It will detect the drive, and then we're going to turn on rapid mode for the Samsung Magician software as well. We do not need to update the firmware of our Samsung drive because, well, this particular drive was already updated to the latest firmware. Now, if this seems like a lot of steps and a lot of drivers and programs to download and firmwares to update and Windows updates to run, keep in mind, there are plenty of people out there who go, boy, I just built a new computer and I have a problem with it, or it doesn't seem to be as fast as I thought, or I ran in a program and it didn't run right. Well, are all your drivers up to date? Did you update your firmware and BIOS? Is Windows updated? No? Well, that's something that you might need to do. The next thing I'm going to do on this computer, and I legitimately did do this for this because I didn't have a spare key, is go get a Windows 10 Pro key. Now I'm going to skip the login part here for obvious reasons. This page is linked in the video description below, along with the unique Tech Deals discount code, which will make it $12.60. That is an affiliate link down there. It does support the channel. Please use it if you do buy one of these keys. I'd greatly appreciate it. And you get 10% off as well. Hit submit order. Choose your payment type, and then you're going to get an instant product key which will activate. I did all that on this computer. The order was created. I come over here to my purchase orders. These are the two that I've bought since I became an affiliate with SCD Key. Hit get the key, copy it over to Windows, and then open up settings, go to update and security, click on activation, click on change product key, copy and paste the key here, hit activate, and you will have an activated copy of Windows 10 legitimately online with Microsoft, and it connects to your Microsoft account, so you basically keep it forever, even if you change things, rather than just being attached to your computer, which is actually very handy. With Windows activated, it's time to download the motherboard drivers themselves. Now, you don't need all of these, and some of them you could certainly use the built-in Windows drivers, but for things like the high-end Realtek ALC1220 audio, we're going to download the Realtek audio driver from Gigabyte's website. I'm actually going to go ahead and delete the other files that I've downloaded before. You don't need them anymore. You can certainly free up space. Right-click, extract. We'll put this in its own folder, and then we'll run the setup program and get the proper audio drivers installed. It takes less than a minute to install these drivers. This is real time right here. I am not fast forward or accelerating this in any way. It just says here that the Install a Shield wizard is installing. Give it a second and it's done that fast. That was absolutely real time with no cuts for the install part. Hit next, reboot, and we'll get back to Windows. Have I mentioned how awesomely fast and amazing this computer is? It really is. 8 cores, 16 threads, 3.7 gigahertz. It is super fast. Now, we've already done the Realtek audio driver. Now we're going to install some additional drivers. The AMD chipset driver is important to install. It has a couple of extra features not included in the built-in Windows driver. Again, exactly the same thing here. Right-click, drag, click extract, let it extract, and then actually run the setup program. Setting up to set up these drivers takes longer than actually running them. You just have to click through a couple of prompts here, accept and install the user agreement. This will come up, choose Express Install. There's really no reason to choose custom. This part here, real time by the way, did not accelerate or trim this part. It goes that quickly. Hit restart now. We have another reboot, back to the driver downloads. Now I'm not going to show all of it because it kind of runs long. The killer LAN driver needs to be downloaded and installed because this does have dual gigabit network cards. The Intel is detected automatically, but download the killer, the USB 3.1 drivers, and then the RGB Fusion software as well. But we're going to skip past that because it basically works exactly the same as all the others that I've shown you. So that's all the system setup stuff. I didn't show you the last of the drivers just because at some point it just pads out the video. I don't want to do that. They work the same as before. Let's take a look at a couple of quick benchmarks. These aren't the game benchmarks. That'll be the next video. If there's anything else in benchmarking you want to see that is not game related, let me know down in the comments below. But for now, here's a few of them. This is Cinebench R15 multi-threaded CPU test being shown to you in real time. No acceleration or cuts here. You can see that we have an 8-core 16-thread processor. Each one of those boxes represents a thread. If you run this on, say, a 4-core 4-thread processor, then there would only be 4 boxes at once. It's pretty quick, all things considered. 3.7 gigahertz definitely provides a nice speed boost here over the base performance. And we have 1652 in the Cinebench score. That's really good. Next up, I'm going to show you CPU-Z. You can see the voltage the CPU is running at. You can see the clock speed. We're at 3.7 gigahertz. You can see the updated BIOS and the motherboard, just as I've shown you before. The memory timings you'll see here, we are at 3200 megahertz. Remember, it's DDR, so 1600 times 2. You can see the clocks there. 16, 18, 18. You can also see here that I do in fact have the ADATA RAM installed that I mentioned, that I showed you in the first video. It is single rank RAM. This is very nice RGB memory. It isn't the fastest CAS rating at 16, 18, 18, but it's certainly good enough and it works very well. Now we're going to run the benchmark tests here. We're getting over 4,500 in the CPU multi-threaded test. Keep in mind, you cannot compare versions of this software to different versions. So I'm running 1.85. If you're running something different, it'll be different. But we're 425, 426 on the single threaded. These are really good results. Now, it is true that some of the Intel chips are faster. I'm going to scroll down here and show you some of the built-in comparisons. A stock 1700 does 3,900 points in multi-threaded and 359 in single-threaded. So setting this to 3.7 gigahertz does make a difference. We'll try something different. How about we come down here to an i7 8700K. Multi-threaded is 3,700, much lower, but single-threaded is 550. So single-threaded performance, yes, Intel is still king, but multi-threaded performance, this Ryzen kicks its butt for a lot less money. Now, how about the former 8-core champ from AMD, the FX 9590? That thing was a beast, ran ridiculously hot, and is utterly obliterated by a Ryzen 7 1700. Look at those scores. It isn't even close. How about an older i7 2600K? Single core, multi-core, not even competing. These Ryzen 7s, for roughly $200 for 8 cores, 16 threads, with an included RGB cooler that will run all day long at 3.7 gigahertz, it's amazing. Now we're going to run one more test, the 7-zip built-in benchmark. These are free tools that you can download, Cinebench, CPU-Z, and 7-zip. You can download them, run them on your own computer, see how well the scores compare. I have zoomed this in by 200% just to make it easier for you to read the numbers because there's nothing else to look at on the screen. We have 43,186 million instructions per second for the combined total rating. You can see the individual ratings there, and you can see it running in real time. Compare this against your Courier computer and see just how much faster it really is. The next application I'm going to run is Ada64 Extreme. This is a diagnostic and stress test program which will really push this computer. I've got all 4 of the check marks at the top left-hand corner: stress CPU, stress the FPU, the floating point unit, the cache, and the system memory. Now I have this full screen so you can see everything. I'll zoom into it in just a minute so that you can see it in more detail. And then I'm going to accelerate this so you can watch the flow of the numbers without it taking too long, but you can actually see that I ran it for a while. I have now zoomed in so you can see the numbers better, and then I've trimmed and moved over the actual elapsed time that would normally be off the bottom of the screen and put it over on the right so that you can see that this is running at 10 times speed. It's fast enough to make this not too boring, but slow enough so that you can actually see the numbers change in real time and watch the temperatures heat up. Now our CPU is running at a measly 1.15 volts. I made no adjustments to the voltage settings whatsoever. That is a very good voltage, to be honest with you. We are running at 3.7 gigahertz on all 8 cores. You can see that at the bottom. And our CPU is pulling about 97 watts of power, at least according to the software reading. The CPU temperature is currently at about 71 degrees Celsius. Now that's warm, but well within operating temperatures. Anything up above 85 to 90 starts to make me a bit nervous. 71 is no big deal. Remember that we are doing a full stress test using all the instructions and the FPU and the cache and the RAM. This is not normal. This CPU will normally run in the upper 50s or lower 60s during normal gaming. Load up Battlefield 1 or Grand Theft Auto 5 and you won't be anywhere near these temperatures. The truth is, this would run faster than 3.7. But 3.7 is a nice safe number that I feel comfortable is going to work for everybody. If you want to experiment and try 3.8, 3.9, you certainly can. You want to put an aftermarket cooler on, you certainly can. But this is a nice safe setting that gives great performance with very little trouble. For under $1,000, this computer is an absolute beast. I will have an upcoming part 3 to this video series with game performance. I'll put a bunch of games into one video, show you just what it can do, not just at 1080p, but 1440p and 4K as well. It is gorgeous, configurable, upgradable, 2nd gen, 3rd gen, possibly even 4th gen Ryzen on this motherboard, lots of RGB options, big case. It has better airflow than you'd think. You can see here, overclocked, the temperatures are just not an issue, and look at that gorgeous RGB. It really is beautiful. thank you so much to all of you who have watched to the end of this video. Hopefully it was interesting, informative, or educational. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with the big huge red button directly below. Questions and comments in the comment section. Links in the video description to the playlist for this, to the previous videos I mentioned, to all the affiliate links and the social media stuff down there. Discord, for example, and my Twitch account. Thanks so much for watching. I will see all of you in the next video.